Chaplain Matthew A. Britton.
Just for short people. Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Feels like Sunday.
It came. I want to thank each of you for being present here today, to Colonel Bentley and to all of those responsible for putting this event on, the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Thank you so much for considering me to speak at this event. I wasn't sure how formal or informal this event would be, so I'm going to start off just kind of talking a little bit, and then I'll divert to my notes on today. But today we are celebrating the 15th Amendment in that it gave African Americans the right to vote, but also within sections, I believe 4 and 5 of either the 14th or the 15th Amendment, there were some clauses there that kept getting extended for about a 25-year period, and this year marks the end of that period, which is why it is very imperative that we go to the polls and vote. And if you aren't registered already, there are some forms at the back table that you can sign and fill out to get registered before this event is over. The reason why it's important to vote, and speaking back to those clauses in the amendments, is because at the time, in the 60s and prior, there were literacy tests that had to be taken to determine whether or not you were qualified to vote. And let's be honest, a lot of the African Americans were uneducated or didn't have a complete education. And of course, it was a given they weren't going to pass that literacy test, so they did everything they could to set up barriers to prevent African Americans the right to vote. And here we are, 55 years later, from the March on Selma, now having the right to vote, and there's still an underrepresented number that are registered to vote in various communities. So if you know individuals in your community that are not voted, that are not registered to vote, to include your squadrons and workspaces, please be that voice to get those individuals to vote and let them know the importance of it is for being a registered voter. I wanted to say something else, but then my thoughts, I lost my thought. But the last few days I've watched documentaries looking back at that horrific moment in history when several African Americans crossed Edmund Pettus Bridge in response to the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson for the right to vote. And what was supposed to be a peaceful protest turned into an unimaginable and horrific event. And it's important to vote. So many people died, gave their lives, and was beaten. And it wasn't just African American people. People of all races and colors that were part of that march. And it's very important that we understand our right to vote. So now I'm going to divert to my notes here, and then I'm going to take my seat. Please excuse me if I get a little preachy. This is where I didn't know how formal or informal this event was. All right? This year will commemorate 55 years since the march from Selma to Montgomery, also known as Bloody Sunday, and indeed it was bloody. Almost 3 years ago, while traveling from Jackson, Mississippi to Atlanta, Georgia, my wife and I stopped to visit the city of Selma. And after parking the car and walking toward the bridge, I began to feel something that I never felt before. While standing at the bottom of the bridge, I was gripped by fear that prohibited me from crossing it, knowing good and well I have the right to vote and have exercised that right since the age of 18. As As I stood at the bottom of the bridge, I saw my heritage with fear and faith, prepared to cross a bridge over troubled water, knowing the possibility of death would meet them on the other side. Now here I am, 52 years later, standing at the bottom of the Edmund Pettus Bridge with zero opposition on the other side, feeling as though I was among the spirit of my ancestors. It's important to note that I didn't walk across the bridge due to the fear that gripped my soul, but as I drove across it, heading towards Montgomery, it was as if I was watching a motion picture. All I saw through the windshield of the car was unimaginable and horrific violence. What started out as a peaceful protest quickly turned into a plague of humanity. The marchers were asked to turn around, return home, or back to the church. And in turn, the marchers asked for a moment to kneel in prayer, only to discover state troopers, sheriffs, gearing up with gas masks, horses, nightsticks, and tear gas. There were individuals standing and running while others were injured and some found dead. 2 weeks later, after this violent outburst, God moved upon the heart of President Lyndon Baines Johnson, allowing for Martin Luther King Jr. and others to accomplish a peaceful protest across the bridge with protection by our nation's troops. In one documentary, Congressman John Lewis said, and I paraphrase, it didn't make sense for President Johnson to send troops to Vietnam while the people of color needed protection from the oppressor. In comparison to the blood of Christ that was shed on the cross for the sins of the world, so it was with our ancestors being beaten and bruised to obtain the right to vote. It was the movement that empowered black people and all people to change their own lives, and they understood that the only way to do this was being able to vote like their white brothers and sisters. They were determined to overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice because they knew by faith that one day they'd overcome. As I stated, it was the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson that began the march in Selma, and had it not been for the men and women, boys and girls that fought for the right to vote for all people, we would not be where we are right now. It was either during or after the period of Reconstruction that Negroes were allowed to vote because they served in the war in the 1920s. Women had also been given the right to vote, yet there still existed a spirit of oppression across the land. As I stated earlier, it was fear that kept me walking across that bridge, and as best as I understand it, we cannot allow fear to keep us from moving forward. For decades and centuries, the black and brown communities in America have been undercounted, and the consciousness of America still has her head turned from its moral and ethical compass. We're supposed to be one nation under God, and from his blood all nations flow, but there's still a spirit of injustice in the land, and we cannot keep silent. Lift every voice and sing. Till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed? Have we come over a way that with tears has been watered? We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out of the gloomy past, till now we stand at last where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts drunk with the wine of the world we forget thee, shadowed beneath thy hand. forever stand, true to our God, and true to our native land. As I was reflecting in the sacred book called the Bible, I came across a passage of scripture recorded in the book of Exodus where Moses received a visit from his father-in-law Jethro, who asked him this question: "What are you accomplishing trying to do all this alone?" Moses said, "Because the people come to me to get a ruling from God." Jethro said, "That's not good. You're going to wear yourself out. Instead, teach them God's decrees and give them his instructions, but select capable, honest men who fear God and hate bribes. Appoint them as leaders of groups of 1,000, 150, and 10. Right now, we're in the primary season for our presidential candidates. While we have different views about the candidates that are running for office, that's really not the office that matters. We have congressmen and congresswomen. We have city council members. We have representatives for the states. Those are the offices that need our attention. And just like Moses selected, or was advised to select, capable and honest men, so must we do the same when we go to the polls to vote. Now, we don't know who's honest and who's capable other than what they tell us on TV and in the report. But by prayer, allow God to direct us in who we vote for. It's imperative to vote and know the history behind the March on Selma and those who gave their lives for us, that we can have access to the polls to vote for our future. What we do today determines our atmosphere for tomorrow. God bless you.
Oh, you can do better than that.